Um, when talking about projects from Christchurch, it's often takes a while because you've got to explain the weird context. Just doing a project is sort of in such a particular context is quite strange and peculiar. So I'm going to try and give a little bit of a brief sort of 2-minute to 5-minute like what's happened in the last 3 years in Christchurch, so that the great Lives and Rekindle and Festa can have a bit more space to describe what they're doing. So obviously about 3 years ago there was a big event in Christchurch which sort of changed the course of that history fairly permanently. There's been a whole lot of activity in that time, some of it amazing, some of it quite sad, some of it sort of remarkable. This is about 6 months old now, I think, this image, but it sums up I think 80% of the building stock in the city, about 1,800 buildings, has now been demolished, and they're still steadily going through it with sort of more to come in terms of demolition. So it's a very strange context where there's a lot of absence of space and a lot of emptiness and a lot of rhetoric about clean slates, but there's obviously a 150 or more longer history of a city on this place. These 4 images here explain to me really well the scale of what happened. So this is the September quake, the liquefaction that happened, and that was the February quake. So you can just see that, just the incredible amount of land damage that happened. And similarly, this was the property damage that happened after the September quake and the property damage that happened after the February quake. So I think on average, every building in the city got damaged 3 or 4 times, I think, over the 2010-2011. So in that response, there's obviously government struggles to respond, NGOs struggle to respond, local government struggles to respond, so there's a massive amount of improvisation and sort of this, I'll return to this end, this massive amount of rewriting of scripts that goes on. All the normal day-to-day behaviours and organisations and mechanisms are suddenly inadequate, and there's all this sort of improvisation that goes on, which I think a lot of what the projects that we do is part of. So I was living in Melbourne when the February quake hit, and a group of New Zealanders over there went, shit, okay, what can we do? So we ran a small little publishing company called Freerange, and just decided, well, the simplest thing we can do is try and get some stories from people as a way to spread just what people went through on the day, as a way to sort of sympathise with what's happening and also fundraise a little bit. So that was our first little publishing gesture, which was there was only one. What was really lovely about the book is there was only one story of actual sort of like earthquake carnage. A lot of the city wasn't directly involved in the sort of stuff you saw on TV, but still equally part of the emotional sort of dealings of that time. I then moved to Christchurch at the beginning of 2012 and got involved with a few projects like the Gap Filler Office. This is a great project. There's a sort of, if you build under 10 square metres in New Zealand and it's movable, you don't need building consent. So there's a number of buildings that have emerged through that sort of loophole. Another project we did soon after was called Playtime, which was a temporary cinema which showed the films of Jacques Tati. Then we invited some UTS students over and did a temporary exhibition space out in public where the students worked on local housing proposals which were adapted to the new earthquake foundation requirements. And with the firm F3, we helped out on some temporary furniture with the council. It'll be 5 or 10 years before the council gets a full urban design of the city done. So in that time frame, they were trying to put some temporary furniture in to keep things looking lively and healthy. And then Festa sort of bloomed later that year, which Jessica will talk more about. But out of sort of a massive 6 months of sort of activity, this festival emerged, which continues to blossom. As part of the build-up to that festival, we decided, let's do a book, sort of as these ideas develop. And over a frantic 2 months, we threw together about 150 projects. The rules for going into the book were that the projects needed to be temporary, public, so in a space, an event or a project, and that was pretty much it. And we just threw everything in that was the book launch. There was a huge amount of people that pulled together to produce the book, so there was sort of 14 or 15 main people, plus about 50 other people that helped out. So it's got everything from the state of the cathedral to these lovely toilets out in Sumner, through to sort of emergency activated cafes out in New Brighton, through to the first Gap Filler project, which was just a really lovely sort of need to gather together, I think, post-quake that happened, through to the Share an Idea campaign, which is, I'll briefly segue into the, just to contextualise the planning, what's happened in the past 3 years with, so September earthquake happened, and generally it was left up to the council. It's a big job, but the government felt that the council could probably handle it. And things like gap filler emerged after September, and I think there was this feeling of having dodged a bullet after September. February hit, and the sense was, I think, that everything was suddenly a lot more serious. And so Sarah was activated by the government as a way to sort of, I guess, support / take over the council's role. They immediately said to the council, okay, you guys are in charge of the central city, we want a good planning process and we want a plan in place within 6 months, I think they said, the time frame. So the council embarked on this quite large-scale consultation exercise with the city, online stuff, and these big workshops that happen, and they developed about 100,000 ideas, it's called, bits of data of ideas for the city, which then got analysed, and out of that became a series of principles which led to the original council plan. One of the nice stories, Hugh Nicholson, who's one of the planners that led this process, talked about is they got through about 20,000 ideas, and the data people said, that's enough, that's a big sample, it won't change much from here. And Hugh and the council said, no, it's important that we go through every single idea, even though it's more work, everyone to put that effort into it, so it was really lovely. A draft got proposed around, I forget the exact dates, I think around August, and that went out for a couple of months, and then council responded to that and released a new plan around November. This is all 2012. The minister then needed to sign off on it. He sat on the plan for about 3 months, I think, before rejecting it around February or March, I think, in 2012. Sorry, the last one's of 2011. And that led to the creation of the 100-day plan and the invitation for a bunch of expert designers to come in. So at the end of the 100-day plan, you had the CCDU blueprint, which was launched around August 2012, I think. And that's been the main guiding planning document for everything for the last year and a half since it was launched. And that's what's increasingly getting a bit of tension around its lack of progress and lack of consultation and things around it. So some of the other projects in the transitional book, these lovely sticky plasters. Great. That's my favourite. Was there a best demo 2013? I don't know if there was. Bicycle powered cinema, another gap filler project. The Restart Mall, which I think is moving soon. Originally planned for 6-month life, and it's now over 2 years and about to move. The 185 chairs, which is a beautiful project. The stadium, $30 million temporary stadium, which is going well, which will probably be there 10 years. Bars. This is a really lovely reimagining of the Christchurch logo, which by Matt Galloway, the river's turned into a road and the cathedral's broken. And it's the 3 people in charge of the rebuild downtown. We had a bit of interesting dialogue with Sarah, where they bought about 100 of the books as pre-order, which was really lovely, and supported the project. But then there was a few entries in there which they realised were quite counter to what their vision of the city was, and so they suddenly ended up with about $4,000 worth of books they didn't know what to do with, which is quite some quite beautiful artworks. This is the Cramner Courts that's since been demolished. There's a book fridge. The Pallet Pavilion, which was up for 2 years and 2 summers, is about to come down in about 6 weeks, I think. There's a lovely urban mini golf course which goes all around the city. There's about 12 holes on different sites, so you can wander around the city and play mini golf through it. This lovely anniversary gesture, which has now become quite widespread, of putting flowers in cones. And these are just some images from the city, sort of describing some of the shots. These are about 3 or 4 months old, I think. As a gesture, I think this is a really lovely reaching out between some of the activism that's going on, some of the architectural moves, and public health, as a gesture towards sort of trying to start that dialogue. There's a concept that I keep coming across at the moment of scripts, which I think could possibly be a handy one. And the idea with scripts is that within any organisation or any physical space or any sort of any project, there's a playing out of a particular set of behaviours and a particular set of expectations that are involved. So the script here is that I stand here and you guys sit there and listen, and that gives me some formality. But within physical design, there's always scripts as well. Within organisation, there's always this sense. So Rekindle's setting this response that you're scripting in increased value for waste wood sort of thing. But then Sarah's, the way they've tried to manage the demolition process is to script a sort of non-existence of that value. And so you can start to think about like the way that decisions inscribe behaviours, and often they come out of control from the original intentions, and that's what designed objects often are. There's an original sense that something's useful, but then as time passes and generations go, these things become sort of weird items and objects left in space, which is what cities often are, is just a sort of amalgamation of all these old scripts all piled on top of each other. And that's sort of what describing is as well. So I think maybe there's a link there where public health, I think, starts to, possibly there's one way of understanding it or reaching out from an architectural point of view, is it's always sitting within the sort of negotiations between all these scripts that exist within the city. And I mean, tenancy is another one. There's all these rules and organisational things that are in place which they go out of date and new rules get written and there's all these unintended consequences and there's all these things going on all the time. So I thought that's my little parting idea.